The email came in at 9:11 on a Thursday morning, while Iona Marsh was already 3 minutes into reel A-1971-047, and she did not look at the screen for another 40 seconds because what was coming out of the studio monitor would not let her. Then the email pinged a second time. She tore her eyes off the reel-to-reel and read it. From Carl Vanger, Station Manager, KPRW Regional Public Radio. To Iona Marsh, Archival Intern. Subject: Audition reels decision brought forward. The board met last night. We're going to lease the basement to the campus library by August 15. That means the unboxed audition reels need to be either digitized or pulped by August 1. I know this is sudden. Please move the reels that look tagged the rest. Baylor. Sorry, Iona. She read it twice. The date at the bottom of her screen said July 7. She had been told 6 months ago when she'd signed the internship paperwork that she had 2 years to digitize whatever she found worth saving. She had now 24 days. The reel on the spindle kept turning. The capstan made its small, smooth sound. The tape moved. The piano on the tape kept playing. Iona Marsh, 28 years old, masters in library science from a state school nobody in this town respected, 6 months into her first real archive job at a regional public radio station in a wet corner of the Pacific Northwest, set both hands flat on the editing desk and listened to the rest of the take. It was a Chopin ballad. The first one. She knew it because her undergraduate roommate had played it once on a borrowed upright in a dormitory common room and had cried afterwards. She had never, in all the years since, heard it played the way the man on this tape was playing it. The opening was slow, not slow the way a student plays it slow the way a man speaks when he is telling you the truth about something that almost killed him. The left hand was patient as weather. The right hand answered without ornament. There were no thrown gestures, there was no platform attitude, there was only the sound of a person who had decided, in the room, to mean every note. Halfway through the middle section, the man on the tape paused for 2 full seconds. Iona's chest paused with him. Then the agitato came in, and the room she could not see wherever the recording had been made went silent around the piano, in a way only a great take goes silent. You can hear it on old recordings. The engineer stops breathing, the radiator stops ticking, the take has the room. The tape ran out at 6 minutes and 40 seconds, the reel slapped. Iona reached forward and stopped the machine. She sat for a moment without thinking anything. Then she did 3 things in fast order. She rewound the reel halfway. She wrote accession, A-1971-047, keep in red pencil on the box lid. She opened the leatherette logbook the station had used before everything went digital and turned to July of 1971. The logbook was a county auctioneer's blank. Iona had figured this out in May, that someone at the station had repurposed in the late 60s. Pages of column-ruled entries in 5 different hands. She found July 1971 by the smell of the paper. The entry for the morning of July 9 read, in a slanted blue ballpoint, 9 a.m., audition slot, walk-in, pianist, no agent, no biography sheet, played Chopin Ballade, no. 1, and own composition untitled, slow in A minor. Engineer Lyle Bean. Producer's note, not for our hour, 2 inward. Suggest he try Seattle. Tape, a 1971-047 field. Below it, in pencil, in a different hand. Note 1972, returned for application to fall concert series. Declined again, LR. Note 1974 tape, moved to long-term storage, basement, West Bay. That was all. Iona read the entry 3 times. The pianist's name was not in the log. The blank where the name should have gone had a small smudge as if someone had begun to write a letter and stopped. She turned the page. She turned it back. There was no name on the morning of the 9th of July, 1971, in the leatherette logbook of station KPRW. She stood up. She walked once around the editing desk, slowly, like a person trying not to startle a small animal. Then she sat back down and looked at the reel box. The reel box was a brown cardboard sleeve with a sticker on it that said only A-1971-047 inches, the same blue ballpoint. The flap had been folded shut and not opened, by the look of the dust line, since 1974. She turned the box over. On the back, in pencil, in handwriting she did not at first recognize as belonging to the engineer Lyle Bean, but did, by the end of the day, because she found his initials on 3 other reels was written, very small, 3 lines. Played like nobody. Said his name was Torin. Said he was from Crescent Bend. That was it. No surname, no phone, no address. The town of Crescent Bend, when Iona looked it up on her cracked phone screen, was a small place, 190 miles south on the Coast Highway, 412 people at the last census. She thought distantly about the August 1 deadline and the pulper that lived in the loading bay. Then she thought about the man's pause in the middle of the ballade and the way the agitato had come in afterwards. Then she stopped thinking about deadlines. She walked upstairs to Carl Vanger's office and knocked on the half-open door. Carl had been at KPRW since 1989. He had the face of a man who had argued with weather for a long time. He looked up from a budget spreadsheet. Iona, I'm sorry about the email. I didn't want to send it like that. Carl, Iona said, I need a day off the digitization queue. I need to drive south on the Coast Highway. He set down his pen. Why? She told him. She did not tell him well. She told him the part about the ballade and the part about the 3 pencil lines on the back of the box and the part about how the tape had not been listened to by a living person, by her count, since 1974. Carl listened. He had a daughter who was a cellist. He had hired Iona over a candidate with better connections because she had been the only applicant who had asked, in the interview, what kind of reels were in the basement. You have until Monday, Carl said. Take the company Camry. The tank is half full. If the tape's any good, bring me whatever you find. If it's nothing, come back and digitize what you can and we burn the rest. That's all I can give you. I'm sorry. She drove south at 11. The Camry smelled of stale coffee and a magazine that had been wet once. The Coast Highway was a long grey ribbon between fir trees and a sea that kept turning over. Iona had brought a small cassette of A-1971-047 she had dubbed in the booth before she left. She played the ballade through the dashboard speakers for 190 miles, and the agitato came in twice, and the second time she had to pull over at a turnout above a beach and breathe. Crescent Bend was a single main street, a Coast Guard substation, a hardware store, a diner called Rita's, and a Methodist church that needed paint. Iona parked in front of the diner. It was 3:15. She walked into the diner and asked the woman behind the counter if she had ever heard of a man named Torin. The woman, who was 60, with white hair pinned up under a paper crown of the diner's logo, dried her hands on her apron and looked at Iona without surprise. Torin Halvard, she said, tunes the piano at the church and the high school, has the little blue house at the end of Mill Road. You from his family? No, Iona said. Her voice did a small thing it had not done since her grandmother's funeral. I work at a public radio station. I have one of his old tapes. The woman's face did a small thing too. You'd best go see him then. He's home Thursdays. He doesn't drive after dark. The blue house at the end of Mill Road was small and clean. A workshop shed stood beside it with the door open. Inside the shed, Iona could see even from the gate a row of tuning hammers on a pegboard, a strip of red felt hanging from a nail, an old upright piano with its top off, and a man bent over its action with a small light strapped to his forehead. He straightened when her shoes hit the gravel. He was in his early 70s. Spare, narrow, white hair cut by his own hand. His shirt had 3 pens in the pocket and a worn brass clip. His hands, when he held one out to her, were the same hands she had been listening to for 190 miles. She knew them instantly, the way you know a voice on the phone. I am Iona Marsh, she said. I came down from the radio station, KPRW. I found a tape of yours in the basement. He looked at her face for a long moment. His eyes were pale grey and unembarrassed. Which one? The 9th of July, 1971, the Chopin Ballade, and a piece of your own in A minor. The man, Torin Halvard, tuner of pianos in a coastal town of 412, set his small light down on the workbench beside the action of the upright and put his hands very carefully, palms down, on the wood. He looked at his hands. He looked back at Iona. They told me to try Seattle, he said. I read the note. Did you listen to it? 3 times. He nodded once. He did not smile. He did not, as far as she could see, breathe. Come in the house, he said. Will you have coffee? I have to sit down. The house was the inside of a careful man. 2 armchairs, a small wood stove, a piano against the back wall in a kind of light Iona realized was set up the way you would set up a North studio. The piano was a Yamaha upright from the 80s, kept like a Steinway from the 50s. A small framed photograph stood on top of it. A young man in a suit too large for him at a microphone with a piano behind him. The young man had Torin's eyes. Iona sat down. He made coffee. He did not ask her any questions about herself for 30 minutes. He asked, instead, in a careful order, who had been at the station when she found the tape, whether the master had been spliced, whether the box had been opened recently, what had been written on the back of the box. She told him. He nodded each time. When she finished, he stood up and went to the piano. He did not sit. He laid his hand flat on the closed floorboard the way the diner woman had laid her hand on the counter when she'd said his name. I played that audition, he said, because my mother was dying in the next county and I wanted her to hear me on a real broadcast before she could not hear any more. They said no by Friday. She died on the Tuesday after. I never recorded again. I did not want to. Iona's hands were cold around the cup. I tuned my first piano in 1972, he said. I made a living. I played at home. I never auditioned anywhere again. I told myself the playing was the thing and the tape was just paper. I told myself that for 55 years. He turned around and looked at Iona Marsh, 28, Library Science MA, on the morning of the second day of the rest of his life. Did it sound all right? He asked. The tape. Iona could not speak for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, Mr. Halvard, I have worked in archives for 6 years. I have listened to 974 reels. I have never heard anybody play the ballade the way you played the ballade. I cannot tell you it sounded all right. I can tell you the engineer who recorded you wrote on the back of the box that you played like nobody. I think he was correct. The old tuner closed his eyes. He kept his hand on the piano. He did not cry, but his face did something else, the small inward shift of a man being told on a Thursday afternoon in his 73rd year that he had been heard. Would you play it again now? Iona said. The ballade. While I sit here, so I can hear the room you have, not the one they had. He opened his eyes. He sat. He waited the 3 seconds he had waited in 1971. Then he played. She had thought she would notice the difference between a man in his prime and a man in his 70s. There was a difference. The fingers were a hair slower. The fortissimo did not blaze the way it had on the tape. None of that mattered. The patience was the same. The middle pause was the same. The agitato came in like weather coming over a headland, and the small, clean front room of a piano tuner's house in Crescent Bend went silent around him the way the booth had gone silent 55 years before. When the last chord faded, Torin Halvard set his hands in his lap. Iona reached into her tote bag and took out a small recorder she had brought in case he said yes to anything at all. She set it on the side table and did not turn it on. I'd like to come back, she said, with proper equipment, with my engineer. I'd like to record everything you'll let us record. I'd like to put A-1971-047 out the way it should have gone out. I'd like to put what you play next to it. I will not pulp anything. I will not make you go anywhere. I will do it from your front room if that is the only room you will play in. You decide everything. He looked at the photograph on top of the piano. My mother, he said, she would have liked to know. She knows now, Iona said. It was not a thing she had planned to say. She was surprised to find that she meant it. Torin Halvard nodded. Then he said, very simply, all right. She drove back up the coast highway that night and got to the station at 1:45 in the morning. She did not pulp the audition reels. She wrote keep in red pencil on every single one. She wrote a memo to Carl Vanger that began, Dear Carl, I would like to propose a small thing, and ended 5 paragraphs later with the line, we owe the man a hearing. In October, the station ran an hour called The Audition Reel. A-1971-047 was the spine of it. The new recordings, 6 pieces in a piano tuner's front room, made with a single microphone and the radiator turned off, were stitched in beside the old. The station's listenership for that hour was the highest it had been since 1994. Letters came in for a month. 3 came from people who had been in the room when the tape was first recorded. 2 came from former producers asking, with care, whether they had ever known the man. Iona Marsh did not put her name on the program. She put Torin Halvard's name. She made sure his name was the first thing the announcer said. On the night of the broadcast, she drove down to Crescent Bend and sat in his front room with him and listened to him on the radio. He did not say anything for the first half. He held a cup of coffee that had gone cold. When the agitato came in, he set the cup down on the side table without looking at it. The hour ended. The announcer thanked the listeners. The piano tuner of Crescent Bend, 73 years old, narrow and clean in his careful shirt, looked at the young archivist beside him and said the only thing he had to say. Thank you, he said, for not letting it be lost. Iona Marsh, who had been told for 6 months that her job was to decide which reels were worth saving, sat in the small clean room and understood, finally, that the reels had been deciding her. She nodded once. Outside, in the dark, the sea kept turning over. Inside, on a Yamaha upright kept like a Steinway, an old piano tuner who had been heard at last set his hands quietly back on his knees and was at peace.